On my eighth birthday, I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And of course, on my eighth birthday, I was so upset. And I would say a decade or two later, I finally realized that was the best gift I could have gotten. The number one toxin that's hurting our gut is stress. I've been saying this one for years, but if something is not a hell yes, it's a hard no. Our organs are a spider web. They don't work alone.
On today's episode of Empowered in Health, I have Kelly Schmidt here, and Kelly and I have kind of reconnected more recently. We have come across each other's paths in different seasons of our lives. We first connected in our PR marketing days in Chicago when we were both working in an agency there. And then we both met up when we were living abroad in Australia, just kind of on a whim, which was wild. And I love the work Kelly does as a functional dietitian. And she has an incredible story that she's going to share with us today about being a type 1 diabetic, her passion for wellness, how it's grown over time, and how she serves in the women's health space. So Kelly, thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited.
It's a pleasure. And I can't get this grin off my face because our paths are just so funny. They're so funny.
Yeah. They are so funny. And, I'm a firm believer in everything happens for a reason, and the timing of things in our lives are very specifically orchestrated. And I know, as my passion has grown, especially more in the functional health space, you have just come across my feeds, my emails, et cetera, more. And it's for a reason, because you're doing such incredible work, and the way that you serve type 1 diabetics, but also the broader wellness space, especially for women, is just tremendous. And so I'm so excited to hear a little bit more about your story, your journey, and kind of dive into the work that you do. So Kelly, can you start us off with sharing a little bit more about just how you really got started as a functional dietitian, how your desire and passion for wellness kind of grew, and where you have gone from, childhood all the way to now?
Yeah, that's a loaded question. So I'll try to give you my elevator pitch. But on my eighth birthday, I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And of four children, of all the cousins and so forth, I was the only one. And of course, on my eighth birthday, I was so upset. And I would say a decade or two later, I finally realized that was the best gift I could have gotten. And to say the least, it is a chronic, not easy disease where I'm making said research 180 extra decisions a day, because I have to understand how much medication I need for the stress, for the workout that I might have done, for the food I'm eating, or the water I'm drinking or not drinking. There's just a lot to do. So that's kind of where my wellness began as an 8-year-old, when I had to count my starches and fats and proteins, which that's not the way things work today. It's more about counting carbs for type 1 diabetes. But it was a lot. It was a lot as a youngster. And then as I grew up, I think that gave me some sort of confidence, maybe a little bit of leadership, because if I didn't take care of myself and it happened, I would have seizures. And I often had seizures in my sleep, and they were scary. Yeah. So I had to grow up quickly, no doubt. And then fast forward, I headed into high school. And as we were all, or many of us were trying to decide, do I go to college? Where do I go? And what do I do? My dad ended up getting pretty sick. So I hadn't mentioned this yet, but my dad, aunt, uncle all had type 1 diabetes. And my dad was in kidney failure. And as my 3 older siblings were all Irish twins for 4 years in a row, give or take, they were all in college. So I was the senior at home. And I woke up one morning on February 5th, 2002. I have that date imprinted in my brain forever. And I'll tell you why in just a moment. But I was getting ready for school, and my mom said, we're going to go to the hospital instead. Again, I had no idea my dad was in kidney failure. They had no idea he would get a transplant or would have a good resolution, because they were fighting to get on the donor list for a long time. So he got a double kidney pancreas transplant that day. And it was a long day. Like in my brain, I think it was 10 hours. I don't know if it was exactly 10 hours. I should probably ask my mom that. Yeah. And so I'm at Ohio State University. My dad was one of the first handful of people who got this double pancreas kidney transplant. And I was so scared. I was so scared, like, oh my gosh, type 1 diabetes. When I was diagnosed, they said I'd have a heart attack. They said I'd have a stroke. Research shows I'm higher risk for cancer. Research shows that I can have seizures. Oh, I've had a few of those. Oh, wait, I can have retinopathy. The list is so imprinted in my brain, because when I was diagnosed, I was given the scare tactic sheet. And I'm sitting in this waiting room, February 5th, 2002, and my dad is living the worst of it. And he had lived many of those complications leading up to this moment. So I was sitting there scared, trying to be brave for my mom, because she, of course, was scared. We had a number of wonderful friends and family coming in and out of that waiting room, but I was like, whoa, when's this going to happen to me? And that can still make me emotional because the risks are there. But then I was like, wait a minute, I want to defy the odds. And I don't want to just defy the odds, but I want to defy the odds for anyone in my shoes or my dad's and everyone in between. So lo and behold, like within that week, I'm like, dietetics is my major. I was looking at a number of schools. Unfortunately, some of those that I was interested in didn't have dietetics. But I ended up going to Ohio University, getting my 4-year undergrad in dietetics, and then moving to Chicago and finishing up that schooling. So as a dietitian, you have to do postgraduate work, and became a dietitian. And I didn't want to just be any dietitian. I wanted to learn this idea of using food as medicine. And I knew those words somehow because I was like, my dad wasn't non-compliant. He followed the rules. He listened to his doctor's advice, and it wasn't enough. Yeah. And so I was like, I became very into, I'm going to make the family dinners. I'm going to help, his cholesterol. And I was looking at sodium, and I was looking at fiber, and I was looking at everything. And now I do that on a higher level in my own business. So yeah, that's kind of that's my elevator pitch of how I got here in short.
So powerful, Kelly. And just such a testament to, your heart as far as really wanting to problem solve through something that was really, really challenging and hard. And I think you hit the nail on the head when you said, like, you kind of were given this list of like, here are all the horrible things that can happen. Here's all the adversity. Here's all the hardship. Here's all the ways that you can potentially anticipate what your life could look like. Yeah. And you really took a step back and said, you know what, like, I really want to find a new way, a different way, a better way to make sure that I'm not only serving my family and learning more for people like your dad, but also learning a lot for yourself and for a lot of other people in the world who need expertise and guidance around, just because we're given a certain kind of information or list of things that could happen, that doesn't mean that we don't have the capability or the capacity to do more research and to really start to figure out how can we actually take a little bit more control of what our health outcomes look like. And I know that's a process and a journey. And so I just can't thank you enough for kind of sharing your story. I know that it will resonate with women in one way, shape, or form, because we've all been there in some way where we're seeing things happen with people that we love. And it's kind of jarring when it's like, okay, but what else can I learn? What else can I study? How can I just expand my knowledge to make sure that we're really doing the best we can to live a fulfilling, healthy life, right? Yeah. So Kelly, I'd love for you to talk a little bit about kind of the landscape as far as reaching out to doctors, talking to doctors, et cetera. I mean, you shared your story. You talked about kind of your experience with your dad. And, this is something that I see a lot with clients I work with, and I'm sure you come across it too in a lot of the work you do, is just this feeling of overwhelm when you're meeting with practitioners, you're meeting with doctors, you're trying to learn about your health, you're trying to get educated about, maybe this is my condition, maybe this is my diagnosis, or maybe these are the symptoms I'm experiencing, but I don't know the questions to ask. I don't know what to research or how to get educated or where to even start. Like, how would you coach someone through that? Or what would be your best advice to women who just want to know, like, how do I equip myself to work with doctors and practitioners?
Yeah, I think it's first understanding, like, what is your need? And what is your need? Is it you feel hormone imbalance? Is it you're wondering about blood sugar? Is it about weight loss? Is it about longevity, aging, and so forth? And I think it's important that we take the time before we show up to that doctor's appointment to have good questions. And every doctor appointment I have, I live by my calendar. Maybe that's because I run a business, but in some shape or form, we need to prepare ourselves. So at any upcoming appointment, so I have an endocrinologist, I have, an eye doctor, I have all my specialists, but I already have questions stacked in those appointment calendar invites. And I think we need to have education for ourselves so we can ask the right questions and have an idea of what we're asking about. So it's really just preparing ourselves. And that might be, there's so many self-help books, there's so many wellness books that are available for us to read about. And again, I'm just going to jump on women's health, perimenopause, hormone health. And there's at least 5 new books this year on hormone balance. And I'm just going to say one more thing, that I don't think the solution's HRT. There's so much more to be in front and behind that to make that work too. So, and I'm curious too, are most of your audience speaking to you about hormones, or is it more about gut health, or is it more about blood sugar? Is it all the things?
I think it's all the things. And, you bring up a really good point, because a lot of the time, the messaging, especially inside of midlife health, our hormones are fluctuating. Well, maybe you just need hormone replacement therapy. And I'm a huge believer in it. I believe that it can be transformative, but I will always say that you have to be looking at the foundations of your wellness forever and always, because that is what actually can continue to sustain your health and move the needle towards any kind of results. So movement, nutrition, blood sugar stability, all of those things will always matter if you want to maximize having supplemental tools like HRT, because it is a supplement, right? It's a tool that you can put in your toolbox, but it's not going to be the thing that transforms. So my clients and a lot of the women I speak to really just want to learn about all of these different things, right? Like, why do I maybe feel different? What do I have to focus on? Like, is it my hormones? Is it my gut health? Is it more of, I just have to kind of retrain myself how to eat? You know, I think a lot of women, especially in the wellness market that we live in, the society that we live in, the diet culture messaging that we've been a part of, like, we've learned things and we've picked up stuff that we actually have to unlearn and unpack a lot as we get into midlife health. And, you know, nutrition and blood sugar stability is a huge driver to so much inside the body as far as symptoms go. And so I love that you asked that question, because I think it's a mix of everything. And I love that you have expertise on all of it too.
I also would say, I think for us, for women, for modern life, time is the thing we don't have a lot of. And if people don't have time to educate and read a book before they go to their appointment tomorrow, I think asking about, I have a problem with X, what do you most often see helps X? And I think that's just a very basic question that can start a conversation. A lot of doctors will only say, I'm only giving you evidence-based research. But sometimes I like knowing, what are you finding works for this problem with other clients? You're not asking HIPAA information. You're just asking, you know, you have 15 clients a day. What are you seeing? Maybe that can help me figure out what I need to look further into overall.
100%. And I love that you're just speaking to the idea of simplicity, like finding a way to ask simple questions. I think that's really powerful, because again, wellness can be so big and so broad and deep and overwhelming. If you're dealing with something and if you have a simple like symptom or something that you're managing, just having a simple question attached to that is awesome. So I really appreciate you kind of offering that, because I know women can get super overwhelmed with even finding and making the time to actually go to see practitioners. But then when they get there and they feel like they're not really equipped, they don't know what to ask, they're sort of gaslit in some way because maybe they don't feel heard or seen, because it's just kind of this lack of education on what they could be asking, but then also not necessarily giving the practitioner the targeted information that you need or you want to learn more about. And so I think really kind of, you know, unpacking that is so important. Kelly, I'm curious, you talked a little bit about books and things that people can kind of read or look into, and you talked about some related to hormones, et cetera. Do you have any favorites or anything that you love the most as far as teaching about longevity, women's health, hormone balance, et cetera?
I love Dr. Mary Claire Haver's books, of course, and I think she's done an excellent job just getting her voice out there. And I think she's done an excellent job because she's pissed, because she is so mad that we're sitting ducks going through this without actual conversations and solutions being brought up overall. So of course I love her work. When it comes to gut health, I like Dr. William Davis's work. He's a cardiologist. He first wrote the book Wheat Belly, but I really like his book. Oh gosh, I'm going to say Dr. Fasano's book. I'm looking behind me. Super Gut. I do really like the book Super Gut. And then I like Dr. Fasano's work if people are really data heavy. He's a pediatric celiac doctor, and he's all about gut health and autoimmune disease. But yeah, I think I could say a number of names here right now.
I mean, there's so many, right? There's so many. And I just appreciate you sharing kind of what has spoken to you or what has helped. And that kind of leads me to my next question, which is kind of talking a little bit more about blood sugar balance, blood sugar stability, but also how that plays a massive role in gut health. I think, you know, this is one area of wellness. I know even for me over the past 5 years, like I have learned so much transformative information around why the gut matters, right? Like what it actually controls in the body, how it's really truly our second brain, how it is part of just our overall vitality. And there is so much in our modern day society that is wreaking havoc on our gut health related to our foods, toxins, products we use, all the things. And so I'd love for you to talk a little bit about, you know, when you're working with clients or really in the work you do, the education that you have, like what are you talking about or educating about related to gut health and how that plays a role in things like blood sugar stability and your overall wellness? We'll get back to our conversation shortly after this message. If you are an overwhelmed and completely confused mom who just wants a simplified, easy to follow, and understandable plan when it comes to their health and wellness journey, then you're in the right place. As a wellness coach, I focus most on empowering women to follow a highly personalized and bio-individual plan that actually gets you results and that feels sustainable for your longevity. I'd love to invite you to set up a free coaching call to talk about your health and wellness journey. Head to erinshreer.com/coaching to set up your call today. Again, that URL is erinshreer.com/coaching to set up your call. And to make it even easier, head to the show notes of this podcast and click free coaching session to set up your call ASAP. Now let's dive back into the conversation.
Yeah, I definitely believe the saying, all disease begins in the gut. And I believe we are what we eat, but to an extent of what we absorb. And a lot of us have such broken down guts or inflamed guts or enough stress where we're not even absorbing the healthy foods we're choosing. Yeah. So when it comes to gut health as related to blood sugar control, there's a lot of uniqueness in each of us. There was a study that came out in the last year or so, and it talked about we have unique, how am I going to word this? We have unique responses to carbohydrates. Yeah. So carbohydrates are not all created equal. And what they found is people who are more insulin resistant are responding to carbs differently than those who might be more insulin sensitive. But how can we fix that? Let me just share a stat. The average American, not the average person with type 1 diabetes, the average person with type 2 diabetes. Type 1 is autoimmune, type 2 is metabolic. But the average American has a blood sugar spike on a daily basis. And when I was 8 years old, I was given that sheet with all the diseases that can come my way. And that's from blood sugar spikes and higher blood sugars. So if we're having a daily blood sugar spike, the average American, that can drive inflammation, that can drive disease. Yep. So when it comes down to disease, it all comes down to gut health. And there's very basic things we can do to optimize our gut. Of course, eat as close to Mother Nature as possible. Eat more whole, real food than not. But, a huge but, don't forget pleasure. A lot of us want to strive for perfection and not progress. But I really think we should eat more real food than not, but definitely have some pleasure on your plate. And that helps portions and that helps happiness and so much more. Yeah. But also the number one toxin that's hurting our gut is stress. Yeah. And I think, I'm 41. 41 is now like the new 6, 7. I have 2 kids. I really want to hold on to this 41. Yeah. I'm taking a tangent. Anyways, I'm 41. And as I've gotten into my 40s, it's really identifying boundaries and sticking to them. And I've been saying this one for years, but if something is not a hell yes, it's a hard no. Yeah. And I think we need to say no to a lot more things because there are too many things we can be doing. And I think we need to identify what are our priorities, and we need to have our push hard along with relaxing. We always want to do. We always want to work out more. We want to lose more weight, but really rest is just as important. So optimizing the gut, I'm just going to say, make sure we're having boundaries and taking a moment when we do eat our food. Yeah. I tell clients, there's a study and it showed, and I mentioned this study a lot. It was participants who drank mineral water, and they did the study twice. So first round, they drank mineral water. They found the participants absorbed over 90% of those minerals. Second round, they had those participants stressed by putting headphones on them, talking about travel and then economics, and they had to regurgitate what they heard. And they found second round, not all those minerals are absorbed. So when we're under stress, we're not even absorbing those healthy whole real foods we have. And I tell clients, let's create some routines. The brain feels safer on routines. And let's optimize the gut by having anchored meals and actually sitting down, not working, no electronics on, and chew that food and try to have conversation relationships with it. And then from there, make sure there's diversity, make sure there's color along with the whole real foods more often than not. So those are some, I have a little more to say, and I know I've gone on quite a bit, but those are things we can do. But when it comes down to gut health, if we do not have a diverse biome, if we don't have diverse bacteria in our colon, that can increase insulin resistance, that can increase inflammation, and that can even throw off our neurotransmitter, our brain chemicals, our feel-good hormones as well. So there's just a lot of connection to these important things.
A lot of connection. I want to recap kind of what you said, because you said so many amazing points in there as far as what we really can do. So the first was whole foods, getting color is huge. really working to get diversity in what you're actually choosing to eat, slowing down and chewing your food and being intentional at mealtime. And this is by far and away the hardest, right?
Yes, it is.
By far and away the hardest. But digestion starts when you are immediately eating and starting to chew in your mouth, right? Like that is when the whole digestive process starts. And when you're just shoveling and not really experiencing your food and not letting your body feel like in more of a calm state when you're actually digesting, like you don't necessarily get the same benefits. Like you're not absorbing in the same way, like you said, amongst other things. And so that's a huge one. And I want listeners today to hear that, because that is a big one that I talk a lot about with my clients too, is how do we get more intentional with how we're choosing, right? How do we think about how we want to eat to essentially potentially minimize blood sugar spikes? But also, how are we trying to be intentional, right? With just sitting down and trying to eat for 5 to 10 dedicated minutes rather than multitasking our way through meals. And so I love that you spoke about that, because these are things that are so imperative for just really longevity and feeling good from the inside out, but also like nurturing our gut health and really taking care of how we feel from that aspect of our wellness. So I appreciate you, Kelly. It's so good. So good. And so many good reminders. Like we need to be reminded all the time of just what really matters. And it can be so simple, but it's not always easy. Like it takes a lot of reminders in the busy lives that we lead, you know?
Yeah. And chewing food's not something Americans are good at.
Yeah.
I think we should chew food over 20 to 30 times, and we chew like 8 at best.
Yeah.
At best.
You know, whenever we talk about mealtime and stuff, I usually think of other cultures and just how mealtime is just such a sacred, like very slow, intentional process. And, you know, in our society, it really is a little bit different. And, you know, I've learned that living in other places. I'm sure you have too. I've learned that from my siblings who have lived in other places, my husband who studied abroad in Europe, stuff like that, when they would have really long meal times or really long siesta breaks in the afternoon, stuff like that. It's just interesting to continue to think about like, what can we implement in the best way possible in a realistic way that really is going to serve our wellness from the inside out. And so again, I just appreciate you, Kelly, kind of sharing more about what are the things we can do to kind of help our gut health, because like you said, you know, we have a lot of things working against us, and that can be tricky, right? Kelly, I'd love for you to talk a little bit about, you know, I want to kind of move into just kind of wellness culture overall, potential diet trends, stuff like that, and just things you've maybe come across with clients and people that you work with. Like, what are traps and stuff that people fall into when it comes to nutrition, right? Like nutrition specifically can be this thing that just feels impossible to figure out, to manage, to get better at and improve. I know even for me, like I'm a coach, but nutrition is my weak link in my wellness journey. Like I am constantly trying to figure out, how can I do better? What else can I learn? What am I focusing on for longevity? Why does that matter? Right. But I think nutrition can just be so confusing, so overwhelming. There's so many rules. There's so many trends. There's a lot of foods and labels and all the things we have to sift through. So I'm just curious, like, what are the traps or mistakes that you've seen your clients or other people kind of fall into? And what's your best advice to kind of work through those things?
Yeah, I think I'll start with my best advice. I think whatever way of eating has to be unique to us. So our gut's as unique as our fingerprint. Like my fingerprint can track me down from the FBI from around the world. Yeah. And our guts are as unique as that. So therefore our diet should be too. And whatever diet we're on, and I'm not afraid of that word, I'm embracing with that word because it's a way of eating. I'm on the Kelly diet. Yeah. And I think we all need to figure out what's, you know, the Katie diet, the Matt diet, all the diets, what's our diet? And we figure that out by eating more whole real food than not, but also trying things on and listening to how our body feels with a way of eating. Yeah. I think some diet traps, gosh, there's a handful of things that I can spell out. And then there's some modern trends that's happening, like fiber maxing. I don't know if you guys have talked about that or heard about that, like spelled like TJ Maxx, but fiber maxing. So I don't know if that's new news, but like protein's getting pushed to the side and fiber's coming to the top. And I think that's good, but protein shouldn't go anywhere. Yeah. But some traps would be like, I've seen so much. So one thing I like to do in my practice, or even if I'm at an event or presenting even to podcasters, but people are on a boatload of supplements for who knows why.
Yeah.
and what quality are there? And I'm thinking like everybody's on 500 adaptogens. Again, we're coming back to the word stress. We all know we're stressed and we're all trying to hack our way out of it. But sometimes it might be just let's carve out 15 more minutes of sleep before getting that, turkey tail or ashwagandha. We can't, and we shouldn't be ashwagandhaing. I'm making up words now every day.
Right. Right.
Healthy things are good, but not chronically. And so I think supplements a category. I think less is more. I think taking targeted things is important. And I do think supplements are important, but I think they should be something that's seasonally applied, uniquely applied, and not just added to. And then at the end of the year, people are on 32 things. So there's a category. Another category is like, let's fear one of the macronutrients. Let that be, ages ago, fat-free. And then now it's low carb. Some people might tinker with carnivore.
Yeah.
And I think we all have sweet spots on what our macros should be. Yep. But those macros should be filled with more real food than not. And it should be fulfilled with color. I think one diet takeaway is eat as close to the farm as possible. But two, just make sure you don't eat naked carbs so your blood sugars are protected. So a carbohydrate, let's say, is rice. So if you look at a food label, whatever macronutrients is the highest, let it be fat, carbs, or protein. If carbohydrates are the highest, we would presume that's a carbohydrate. So let's say rice, that's predominantly mostly carbs and only carbs. And if I ate carbs right now, my blood sugar would spike so much, even though if I dose insulin. But if I put a little protein or fat with that, it could blunt that black diamond of a spike into a bunny hill. And that's what we should be aiming for all the time with our diet, whatever that food is that makes us feel well.
Yeah. And you're speaking to, that's for everyone, right? And this is something that I talk about too, is how do we eat in a way that has a little bit more of a strategy so we're not getting into these huge blood sugar spikes? Because at the end of the day, like you talked about earlier, most Americans are getting massive blood sugar spikes throughout the day, whether that's through caffeine on an empty stomach, too much sugar, eating naked carbs, whatever that is. And as that happens more and more and more, that is what leads to the road of chronic disease, right? That is where we can go if we're not careful and we don't protect our longevity with intention. And so you hit the nail on the head with when you are eating, think about how you can use a little bit of a strategy to get a variety of colors and whole foods, but also all different macronutrients, because they all matter. They all serve a purpose. And like you just said, we've kind of been taught in some way like that we should fear one macro, right? Or that we shouldn't be consuming X, Y, and Z. But it really comes down to what works for you, right? What makes you feel good? And how do you continue to nurture getting all of the macros in some capacity with a good variety of micronutrients? So you're just hitting all the markers, like, because that's at the end of the day, that's what nutrition is, right?
Yeah. I often, again, the word simplify, I think that's what we all need, simplify. And nutrition really is a $1 billion industry, but it's really not that complicated. But I always tell clients protein, fat, fiber, PFF, protein, fat, fiber, and thinking of those carbohydrates, reaching for things that are higher in fiber, because fiber is so important to support that diverse bacteria to give us those short chain fatty acids that support inflammation, insulin resistant, and the gut lining, and so much more.
Yeah. Will you share just quickly, what are your favorite fiber forward carbs, just so people can kind of continue to learn?
Okay, this is not a carb, but it's newer and I'm really excited about it. But it's basil seeds. Have you ever used basil seeds?
No.
So basil seeds look just like chia seeds, but they're higher in iron and they're higher in fiber. So that's more of a fat than I would call a carbohydrate. But my favorite carbohydrates is really, I would reach for, again, people might think, oh, fiber, salads.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, salads, lettuce they're not that high in fiber. So I'm thinking cruciferous vegetables. I'm thinking berries. I'm thinking even cooked and cooled carbohydrates like potatoes, rice, oatmeal, because that'll build that resistant starch, another form of fiber. So there's insoluble, soluble, and resistant starch is considered a fiber. Yeah. But those are a handful to name a few. But basil seeds is something I'm pretty jazzed about.
I love that. I have not tried those.
Yeah, you can find them on Amazon. They're great.
Love that. Kelly, will you quickly talk a little bit more? I want to kind of circle back quickly to type 1 diabetics. I actually have type 1 diabetic clients. I know you're a type 1 diabetic. You work with type 1 diabetics. I want to speak to them a little bit because I think you, in your story at the beginning, you talked a lot about just some of the fear, right? Like some of the information that gets shared about what could potentially happen or what your road could look like or how you have to really be in this zone of managing things so much more. You talked about
Yeah.
200 extra decisions a day or more because
Yeah.
of what you're managing because of your physiology. So I
Yeah.
want to talk a little bit about type 1 diabetics, the information we've talked about, and how they can continue to really think through simplifying this process, right? We've talked about
Yeah.
Simplify too. I want to make this easier for everyone, including type 1 diabetics that I've worked with. And I'd love for you to speak to, like, what do you do in your work to help simplify, to help kind of take some of the fear away, to help kind of, minimize some of the added stress that you inevitably have to manage, which I know comes up. Talk me through that process.
That's a loaded question. And my mind's going through a number of things. So when I talk about type 1s, I'm just going to put into a category of autoimmune disease. So most of my clientele are type 1s, but I also have a handful of clients that have a Hashimoto's, which is an autoimmune form of thyroid, and a lot of other autoimmune conditions. And then I also help women who just have, inflammation and they want to fix that. But for the most part, I'm most often every day talking to autoimmune disease. And when we talk about autoimmune disease, I think of Dr. Fasano. I mentioned one of his books is some of my top, but Dr. Fasano has highlighted that all autoimmune disease has 3 pillars. You must have these 3 pillars to actually get the disease that we have. And that's some genetic disposition, some form of a permeable or leaky gut, which is under a lot of question by conventional medicine. And then number 3, some form of a stressor. If I think of my 3 pillars, my daddy and uncle are all type 1, and people may not have type 1 in their family, but they might have autoimmunity in the family. Yeah. So here nor there, there's that. My leaky gut, I know it's there because I've been doing all the fun functional tests on myself and correcting it. But it's a spectrum, how far someone's gut can be damaged and healed with optimal life strategies and so forth. And then number 3, I had a virus right before I was diagnosed, and it was a pretty bad virus. And speaking of virus, COVID-19 has actually shown an increase level of diagnoses of type 1 diabetes because they're finding that virus is actually attacking the beta cells in people. So when I try to simplify with clients, like, yes, we have to make all these decisions and understand our unique type 1 diabetes. We can't take the cookie cutter recommendations we're giving from our endocrinologist to, one unit of insulin is equal to 15 grams of carbohydrates. We got to figure out that formula is right for us. We can't treat every low with 15 grams of carbohydrates either. We have to figure out how we treat lows. We have to dial things in. Yeah. But as we dial in all that math, because we're doing math all the time, is with my clients, I go 10 layers deeper. And I try to understand, how is your gut? How is your diet impacting your gut? How are your food choices impacting insulin sensitivity and more? And I try to help clients, 1, defy the odds, 2, become as insulin sensitive as possible, and 3, to heal that gut lining. And those all hit the same targets. But how do I simplify working with clients is I really listen to them. I look at all of their data and I try to figure out where their weak links are and support them.
Yeah.
So that's not that simple. It's hard. And it's really hard. Like right now I have a huge influx of women who have had type 1 for at least 30 years. Wow. And type 1's not their only problem. Yeah. So there's other little datas, they're like, oh, I'm working with my cardiologist and I'm working with my endocrinologist on my thyroid, but no one's crossing nodes and supporting each other. And our organs are a spider web. They don't work alone. And that's one of my bigger frustrations. And 2, I empower my clients. This is what you need to ask your doctor. I actually want you to get the lab from them and not me, even though I can give them labs, because I want them in on these conversations overall. So you're getting me passionate.
I love it. And, you hit on 2 really big things that I want to make sure I recap. One is bioindividual health. Like what I heard the most from you as far as how you empower women, how you work with type 1 diabetics and beyond that, right? Autoimmune disease, et cetera, is you get into the root of their unique story and their unique journey. And there's a huge part of the wellness space that really hasn't done that in a lot of ways. And so I come across a lot of women that feel more confused and more lost than ever because they haven't worked with a coach or a practitioner that's gone bio-individual enough to understand their uniqueness. And I love that you do that because that is what's transformative. That's what actually moves the needle towards a fulfilling, healthy life and longevity that you deserve, right?
Yeah.
The second thing that you spoke about was how the body is a spider web, is what you said. And that is true. Like
Yeah.
we have 11 systems in the body that are wildly interconnected. And that's one of the hardest pieces between conventional and functional med is we're either looking in isolation and in silos in conventional med, and in functional, we're looking at the whole system. Like how do we get deep enough into the root of what's causing all of the symptoms that someone's essentially feeling? And that is a totally different kind of health strategy and medicine overall. And there's room for both, like there's necessity for both. But I think that's a huge piece to continue to educate women about, because if you have, one kind of symptom, there's something downstream that's causing it. And so often it's connected to the gut, to hormones, to blood sugar, to cortisol, to adrenals, thyroid, all the things. And so I just appreciate you sharing that too, because that is information and education that we as women need. Absolutely. I love it.
Yeah.
Love it, Kelly.
One thing to add is, while my answer of how to take care of ourselves isn't simple, but I do use a framework when I help clients. And you may be familiar with this from being on some of my marketing and so forth, but is I have my GRACE method.
Yeah.
And my GRACE method is something I've sharpened over the last 3 years. And it took me all the years before that in my private practice. So I'm on year 13. So the 10 years prior to identify, but it's my GRACE method. And that's 5 pillars of supporting someone's health, no matter what the goal is, towards success. And that's gut health, routines, adrenal health, clean living or liver support, and then exercise. So that's my simplicity part of that answer.
I love it. And, having a structure, having a framework, just having a guide, right? Having a guide that is really helping you strategically think through your holistic wellness. Like that is the goal, right? And that is what really can transform your health in wildly awesome ways. So Kelly, I'm so grateful for you. Really quickly before we wrap up, will you speak to the woman that's listening to this that feels overwhelmed in some way in her wellness journey, right? She's resonating with some of what we're sharing. She wants to figure out, like, how does she take a step forward towards advocating for herself, working with her doctors better, figuring out how to just change her situation. What would be the one simple step you would tell her to start with?
Might be twofold, but I would say slow down and just write things down for a week. Write down what your goal is, and then write down what you're doing and try to identify any trends. When you eat X, Y, and Z pops up. Or when you don't sleep, this becomes more triggered, or whatever it is. So then I find, and maybe it's, even though I'm 41, I still find value in pen and paper. There's so much value in pen and paper. I can give anyone a functional medicine test and identify crazy data, but the foundations have to be there. We need to be present. We need to understand what's going on with ourselves before we can ask for the exact things. So I would say pen and paper it, get to know yourself. So then when you find that person to work with, you know how good of a fit they are, and also what more so big needs you have.
Yeah, so good. I love that. I'm a huge pen and paper person. Just because my brain gets so overwhelming, I have a lot going on in my brain all the time. And so I have to put it on paper. And really that helps me get so much more self-aware of what's actually happening. What am I feeling? What's real? What's not? Right. And I love that as a tip. So good, my friend. So good.
Oh, good.
Kelly, will you quickly share, how can people find you? How can they connect with you? How can they learn more about your GRACE program, et cetera?
Sure. So I have a few emails, and people might notice that if they've come across me, but I'll just give my emails, Kelly with a Y at kellyschmidtwellness.com. So it's KELLY, Schmidt is SCHMIDT, and then wellness.com. My website's kellyschmidtwellness.com as well. And then on social media, I'm Diabetic Dietitian. Reach out, let me know your questions, connect. I'd love to connect with more women.
Yeah. Awesome, Kelly. And we will make sure everything is linked in the show notes so you can connect with Kelly more if you have questions about the work she does and just the incredible impact she's making in the women's health space. So Kelly, thank you again for your time today, my friend. So grateful.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode. I know balancing time and energy can be a challenge, and I'm so proud of you for listening in and investing in your wellness journey. I feel incredibly grateful to connect with you and for the opportunity to share more knowledge, stories, and encouragement related to all things wellness. I would love to hear how this podcast has served you. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe and leave a review on either iTunes or Spotify. Your support truly means the world to me and helps me reach more women just like you and me who are looking to transform their health from the inside out. Plus, when you share this episode with a friend, we invite more women in to learn alongside us. What a gift. Remember, knowledge is power, and the more we know, the better we can do. For ourselves, for our families, and our future. Well done on taking the step towards a healthier, happier you. Until next week, stay empowered and stay well.